This is Dennis Donahue, and welcome back to another episode of the Grower Talks. And I'm joined by my good friend Peter Wren Hilton. Peter, how are you?
Very well, Dennis. Great to join you again for. I think this is our sixth Grower Talks podcast, so we're certainly building up a nice library, and really keen to learn more from the insights from Kevin today. Yeah, really interesting. I think 30, 40 minutes ahead right now.
Well, we were visiting with our guest Kevin Andrew, who's with Illumag. Kevin and I had to make sure I got the pronunciation right. There's always that tendency to make it sound like he's from France with Illume, but it's Illume. But Kevin's a particularly, he'll be a great guest. But one of the things I'm looking forward to visiting with Kevin, and he kind of embodies what the nature of Platform 10 is, which is a global platform designed to work throughout the world. And Kevin's had a terrific career, and I'll note for the record, he's a past chair of the Western Growers Association. But he's been a global ag citizen for a long time. So, Kevin, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Peter.
And why don't we just kind of launch in? The first thing we typically like to do is have our guests talk a little bit about their career and then their journey to what you are doing today, and then elaborate on what you're doing today. So,
Well, I never know how I got into table grapes because I grew up, in southern Arizona. My father grew cotton, watermelons, cantaloupe, stuff like that. But he did tell me when I was gonna, I had when I got out of high school, and I thought my career path was one of two ways. I was either going to be playing the NBA because I played basketball at Fresno State, or I was going to be in agriculture. Because that we one of 8 kids, we all worked on the farms every weekend and summer vacation. It wasn't a vacation because we had to get up earlier than school and stuff like that. But I'm the only one of the 8 kids that end up going into agriculture. But so I didn't end up in the NBA, but I ended up in agriculture. And I started out, and my dad told me though before I went to Fresno State, he says, he goes, because he grew cotton, he grew cantaloupe, row crops and stuff. He told me, he goes, I think the future is really in permanent crops. And he goes, I think trees and vines are the thing to do. And so I went to Fresno State, not knowing anything about trees and vines. I became a viticulture major and studied the viticulture part of it. And I really kind of fell in love with grapes. That I was in first few years, my first job was in the wine grape industry, but I always thought there was more of a challenge in the table grape industry. So I ended up in the table grape industry after that, my second stint, and that was with Sunworld, and that was a 27-year stint there at Sunworld. We were big in table grape, but it was also tree fruit. At Sunworld, we grew everything from A to Z, and Dennis, you kind of talked about the global. That's one thing that was nice about summer. What a great career, because I was able to. We had licensees because we had our own breeding of tree fruit and table grapes. So we would license growers around the world to grow our variety. So as a result of that, I would, on the technical side, travel around the world with our licensees and to meet with these guys. So, it was like South Africa, regular trips to South Africa, Australia, to southern hemisphere, at like South America, Mexico. So we even had a project in Egypt. We were the lead on a project in Egypt for 4 years. It was going to be in the southern part of Egypt, and it was the desert. You had to have a GPS indicator just because there was no landmarks. But so I became kind of global. And now, it's you talked about Illume. A friend of mine, Jeff Fabry, we started Illume. He started it as an almond asset management company, and we talked for years when I was even at Sunworld about maybe we would do something together in the table grape realm. Well, when I left Sunworld, that was Jeff and I talked, and we thought maybe it's time. So about 10 years ago, we decided, let's expand his deal from almond asset management to table grapes. And we had a couple of the clients he had at that time that wanted to do table grapes, and so now we've got 5 clients to do table grapes, and they're a very diverse group of clients. But it's one of the things we decided at Illume was, we could have planted public varieties. And I told Jeff and our clients, I said, look, we can plant these public varieties, but I said, we need to be on, like, either, what do you want to call it, the bleeding edge or the leading edge. And I think we should be planting all these proprietary varieties. And I said, I don't think we should plant the public varieties. I said, I think those are going to fall out of favor. And so we just launched it, and we got big. You hear about guys, well, they planted 100 acres. We planted 700 or 800 acres the first year, 700 or 800 acres the second year. I mean, we were expanding at a rapid clip, and it's so we're now just under 3,000 acres of table grape. Well, we still do the almond deal as well, but so it's but we also talked at Illume, and it's like we talk about just starting the company. I mean, we started our own sales company. If you talk a lot of these retail buyers and stuff, the last thing they want is another shipper calling them about table grapes or any product. And so we started 4 years ago. Of course, right when we launched and kicked off our own sales department, our own sales team, this thing called COVID hit the world, and all of a sudden you're like, we couldn't go visit anybody. We couldn't. People are going, "Who are you? What are you?" And it was a tough go for a year trying to just get people knew us from the industry, but they likely didn't know Illume and who's Illume, So it's been a tough go, but we've been now at 4 years with our own sales group. It's like we have gone leaps and bounds, and it's like we are doing some huge things here. But we've also decided that I always looked at it like the vegetable industry. I don't think you can be in this thing for 6 months and then get out for 6 months. I think you want to be in this thing 52 weeks out of the year. So that's kind of what we're doing now. And I've been involved in Peru for the last 10 years with a project down there. So it's we are even Illume, which started here in a California deal. We're looking now to be a global entity as well.
Well, two thoughts occur to me just in terms of trying to help educate the audience. So talk a little bit about starting in California, and you mentioned Peru. From a production standpoint, where is the California table grape industry in terms of likely to see less acreage? And then the other thing that I think people would find of interest is, and the farm asset management company, over on the Central Coast, typically the shippers or landowners are dealing with growers at their own land. So the Central Valley is just different. How is that evolving in terms of as the future unfolds? I assume we're going to see more of what you're doing.
Yeah, at first, it's like, I think looking at, well, I guess I'll maybe touch the asset management deal first. I mean, there's a lot of farm managers. I mean, when I first started in this business, I was a farm manager, but we didn't do the banking, we didn't do the financial stuff. We managed the farm. What we do now as an asset manager, we truly we manage that from A to Z, everything. We secure their financing. We do all the modeling and anything they want done. We even have a client right now that's in the process of selling. It's our second largest client. What we did was we facilitated finding a buyer for that, and now we brought another institutional group in that is going to buy that institutional group out. So it's it's a different deal. It's like and it wasn't something that this was what my partner started, but one of the things that these guys do is they want to see skin in the game. We don't just get a management fee. It's all, our fees are based on, we share in the profit, and if there's no profits, there's no fees. We just, so we really have our feet to the fire. On your first question about the table grape deal, I think we're in a kind of a state of flux right now in California on the table grape industry. A few years ago, we had a huge crop. Arguably for about 10 or 12 years going back, the table grape industry in California was really firing on all cylinders. We were doing, everybody was doing well. It just seemed like all of us were making profit. Everybody was doing really well. And I think we were clipping along at 80 million boxes, 85 million boxes, and it seemed like everybody's doing well. Well, other guys in other industries were looking at that saying, geez, I should get into that table grape deal. And I think what happened is we had a lot of guys that typically were not in the table grape industry decided they were going to get in the table grape industry. And as a result, I think it was 5 years ago, 2017, we had our largest crop ever. We had 117 million boxes. And it just, we're still recovering from that. I mean, the next year we were like 10, 108, 110. And it was too many, because then we lost any leverage we had. I mean, all of a sudden it was like, you just, cold storage, if we're full, you're walking away from some fields and things like that. So I think we've kind of gone through a little bit of we're in this state of flux right now, and some acres are coming out, or have been coming out. And you drive around and you see very few new plantings, where if like 5 and 6 years ago, you drive down the road and there's a new 40 acres, there's a new 160 acres. You don't see that now. You might see somebody kind of like replacing a few acres that came out. So it's this year, of course, with the hurricane, we're knocked our crop down by about 25 million boxes. So I think we're going to end up right around 75, 76 million boxes. But lo and behold, shorter crop, better pricing. So that the later deal actually got pretty good, because we had better pricing. And we're not going to beat 75 million boxes in 2024, but maybe we don't know what the sweet spot is. Is the sweet spot 90, 92, 85, 90? So we all kind of think maybe 85 to 90 is where we need to be. So we'll see.
Peter, you have anything, or I obviously have more, but if you want to jump in, feel free.
No, I certainly do, Kevin. I found that introduction fascinating. I want to look at one area that you've mentioned in a little bit more detail. Certainly, when you were with Sunworld, you were talking about developing new grape varieties, cultivars, and that Illume, again, proprietary varieties. I guess when you're looking at a new variety, you're looking at taste, texture, color, maybe yield. What kind of process do you go through in terms of getting consumer insights, consumer research, to actually identify what might be successful as a new variety? What kind of process do you go through?
Well, of course, we look at it first, and and we actually did it. Because one of the varieties we looked at had, it was a great flavored variety. I mean, I tasted it and I go, man, that's one of the nicest eating grapes I've ever had. But even the breeder told me I wouldn't plant it if I were you. Well, the breeder never tells you that, that this is like their children. They'd say, oh, this is, they're all great. And he said, it just doesn't color. He goes, we just can't, no matter what we've done, he goes, it just gets this splotchy color. So I just really wouldn't plant it. Well, two of our clients had tasted it. They said, we don't care. Plant that variety, because, you'll figure out how to get it colored, Kevin. And I'm like, okay. So we actually did some consumer groups. So we did that. We actually did some blind tastings, and we had some millennials, we had some 35 to 45, housewives 45, and we did, I think, 4 different groups, and with that variety, and they had that variety on the table. And it was interesting. Almost all of them said, look, I don't really care about the color. It's got such great flavor and it's got aroma, and we think that's a great variety. I would buy that all the time. So we kind of went with that, said, okay, that's what the consumer wants. But you can't forget that the gatekeeper on the retail is the buyer. And if the buyer doesn't like it, it doesn't matter how much consumers in a little blind study say, well, I like that variety. And we have found that with that variety. So we planted it, and we have found that they really aren't that. The buyers have a problem with the color part of it. So they're not buying much of it. And you mentioned the qualities on the varieties. Of course, flavor. It's funny. We all used to talk about big berry size and yield, things like that. And I think flavor was far down the list, unfortunately, if you go back 15, 20 years ago. Now it's like, people say, wow, what a novel approach. You guys are coming up with grapes that taste good. So I think that, at Sunworld, we bred lots of tree fruit varieties. And I remember we had one nectarine. It was beautiful. It was large. It had great color. Had everything. One of the retailers one time said, that thing tastes like a potato. So it's like, yes, we'll take that out of our portfolio. So I think, flavor, it seems like the two most important to the consumers now on table grapes are flavor and very crispness, crunch. And it's they obviously the consumer isn't too worried about yield. We are obviously we'd love to have the big yield. So that, but those are kind of the three or four main characteristics we look for.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. But back to you, Dennis.
Well, no, I was going to say kind of going back to kind of the global aspect. So as you survey the world and all of, and from a table grape standpoint, where does the percentage? How's the pie chart look? You mentioned there's going to be a sweet spot for California, but from a global table grape production standpoint, California is really a big player, an important player, obviously to us, but on a percentage of table grapes worldwide, there are some big production areas.
Well,
Where do you see the
the
most
biggest
activity?
the biggest production area, and we don't even know what their actual official production is China. I mean, China is huge. They have a massive industry, but it's like, but the vast majority of it gets consumed in country, and China still buys, U.S. California table grapes and table grapes from other countries as well. But California is, I mean, we're big, and I mean, if you look going back, I'm involved, as I said, in Peru, and forever I was going down to Chile 3 or 4 times a year because we had growers down there, and I would go down there, and that back, you go 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, Chile was 90 to 95 million boxes as well, about the same size as California. And Peru was a sort of a fledgling industry. And Dennis, I've told you the story about, I was in Chile about almost 20 years ago and talking to a Chilean grower, and he said something about Peru. And I said, yeah, I hear they're getting a industry going. And he said, well, do you want to go? And I said, yeah, someday I should go to Peru. And he goes, how about tomorrow? And so we launched and went out, got tickets and flew to Peru and spent a couple of days there. And I told him, I said, after the trip, I said, when these guys figure it out in Peru, you guys are in trouble in Chile. They have better weather, better water, and a better labor situation. And it has turned out to be true, because when Chile was 90 plus million boxes back then and Peru was 8 or 10, now Peru is 70 to 75 million and Chile's 50 million. They just have some advantages. I was just in Peru last week, and I tell the guys down there, I said, never leave here. There is not a better place to. I've grown grapes in Australia, Mexico, Egypt, and it's in South Africa and Chile. I said, there's not a better place to grow table grapes than southern Peru. I mean, it's the ideal conditions. I mean, the vine never goes under stress. They have just, the quality is just outstanding all the time. So it's so things are changing, and there used to be kind of gaps in the table grapes and supply. There are no gaps anymore. I mean, there's always overlap. We always tend to overlap. Southern, northern hemisphere's finishing and southern hemisphere starting, and then it's just. Even when I first started going to Peru, I was involved with a group that was in northern Peru. Well, northern Peru can actually harvest in the middle of September. And I was telling the guys at the time, I said, I don't think you want to do that, because you're coming right into California's wheelhouse in September and October. That's when the vast majority of the California table grapes. So I said, you won't have the market of the U.S. And I said, and plus, all the export that U.S. does, so it'll knock you guys out. But that's what they have to do in northern Peru, because they have to be out of the way by mid-December, because they get the rains. Now southern Peru is different. It doesn't bump up so much with California. California is kind of winding down when southern Peru is starting, but kind of worldwide now, there's no days or months or weeks in the calendar when there aren't grapes on the store shelf. It's like they're like bananas now. They're there all the time.
With all that, we'll kind of shift gears and go to platform 10, and even though we'll say Illume rather than Illume, part of our raison d'etre, as it were, is we've got the accelerator component, and we'll be and Peter and I are looking forward to announcing that Illume is going to be part of our global grower trial network, and we'll be down in Australia at Evoke Ag, and we'll be making an announcement of who our growers are, and so we're excited to get your name go public, as it were. So when you look at production challenges, what are you
Well,
thinking about, and then, as you know, dealing with whether it's regulators or customers, we appear to be heading towards a world of less chemistry and more biology. So since you're responsible for everything from start to finish with all of your clients, how are you thinking about that challenge in general, and then how does it work specifically? Is California going to track like Peru? Are we going to be able to get some commonalities? What's your general thought about production and what keeps you up?
well, production, we all fight the same issues. I mean, it's like there are some places, and like Peru, one of the things that Peru doesn't have an issue with is climate. Near the issues that we have, or Chile has, for example. Chile's not that, they butt up against Peru, but Chile has weather more similar to California's Central Valley. I mean, they get the big swings in weather, they get the rain, they have hail, frost, things like that. Peru, I mean, it's, I have it on my phone, our weather station down there. And I mean, it is like Groundhog Day. It is like every day pretty much the same. So they talk about, oh, we've had a cool spring. I go, what are you guys talking about? It's 2 degrees. It's like, I said, I send them pictures of what our degree, we swing 50, 60 degrees, here and in the springtime, but it's like, and then hail and things like that they just aren't going to get there. But you still have the same issues. And I mean, of course, one of the big issues on table grapes is we're highly labor intensive, and it's all about labor. Where are we going to find the labor? It's And I've talked to the guys in Peru, and I said, well, what we talk about, I said, is there a labor shortage? Or we talk about unemployment. They can't believe people get paid for not working in the United States. But it's like, I said, well, is there plenty of labor? They said, oh, no. And I said, well, you don't have unemployment. They said, no, if you don't work here, you don't eat. And I said, but there's going to come a day, especially as the industry expands and other crops go in, that you're going to be competing for that labor. And they don't believe me, but I tell them, I said, one thing, I said, your labor costs are going to go up. I said, the only guarantee I can tell you is your labor costs are going to go up. And I used to tell guys that in Chile 25, 30 years ago. And one guy said one time, he goes, you always, every time you come down here, you talk about watching our labor costs. He goes, Kevin, this is in California. We pay these guys. And he told me at the time, he goes, we pay these people $4 a day. And for every one of these workers here, there's 10 Indians up in the mountains that'll come down and replace them for that $4 a day. And I said, okay, well, someday your costs are, well, now the Chileans sent a group here just to kind of study how we do it in California, because their costs have gone up exponentially now. So now they're almost equivalent to what California has to pay for labor. And I think that's the one component that, it's always going to go up. Material costs kind of, sometimes they go up, they go down, but labor's always going to go up. And I think that's one of the things we all battle. Even clients we have now in California, and potential clients that we talk to, investors, they asked me about table grapes. They said, what's the future? And I said, look, I think there's still a bright future. I think the industry's gone through kind of a rough times after those huge crops back to back. And I think there's been sort of a weeding out process here. And I said, but I think we're gonna find stable ground here somewhere. And I mean, one of the things that we really found it this year, in talking, when I was down in Peru, we were meeting with a couple of major retailers. We're down there, and we've had kind of a supply issue this year, and just been kind of, Chile finished early, and Mexico started a little late, and that left kind of a little gap in grapes. Then we started in California. Then we had the first hurricane ever to hit California, and there was a big shortage of grapes. And one of these things retail buyers told me, they said, we really found out now, when we actually didn't have grapes on our shelves for a while, because either we couldn't get them or they were too expensive. We got a lot of complaints from our buyers, from our consumers and customers, that where the grapes, or why don't you guys have grapes? And then they said that we've always kind of known this, but they said the two things that really move the needle in the produce department are berries and grapes. And they said, and it's people just started demanding grapes. So they said, when after the hurricane in California, there's one major retailer said, we came out and we took prices up like $6 or $8 a box. We have to have grapes. So I think that tells you that there's still a future in table grapes.
Well, no, we're glad to hear that. And talk a little bit about the production challenges, and then, for instance, things like, climate change. I mean, that in the sense that, um, not from the philosophical side, but I think we can all acknowledge the game's different. Pest pressure is different. What are you, from a disease pest standpoint? What's on your mind, whether it's in California or Peru?
Well, not as much certainly in Peru, but here, in California, I mean, it gets tougher and tougher with all the regulations. And, we talk about pest disease and how many tools do we have in our toolkit that we can battle these things with. And I mean, it just, we keep losing these tools. And I mean, it just, we have one insect that is a big problem is mealybug, and that's affects all grapevines. But this thing, if you get mealybug out of control, it's like somebody poured honey all over all your bunches. And I mean, it's just like, and it's a tough little insect to battle. And we've always had multiple tools that we could attack it with. Well, the state of California has started taking this off the list, that's off the list. I mean, we're down to now a couple of tools that we can use. And then some of these things they're telling us, well, you can only use it once. We're like, ugh, and that's like, so I think that's for us here, that's what we look at as more of the regulatory deal. It's, and even in the Southern hemisphere, and on the project in Peru, we do all kinds of certification, whether it's Global Gap, all the food safety certifications and stuff. And they all ask the same questions, whether you're Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, and they all want to know the same things. And they're all coming out and checking everything. They come out with the white gloves on, and they're making sure you're doing everything right. They're checking your spray records, and it just so. I think I took a group down last week to Peru, and I think these were not great people, but I think they were surprised at how modern the Peruvian deal is. It's if somebody just plopped you down there and you look at it and say, well, and this is California, right? No, it's but because they're doing everything we're doing here on the food safety front. Now, I think some people think whether it's Mexico or Peru or Chile or other countries, oh, they're really lax on their food safety. They're not. I mean, because it's who they're selling the grapes to that keeps them
Right,
holding their
right.
feet to the fire.
Yeah. Well, no, if you're you and you subscribe to I got to be there 52 weeks out of the year, you've got to be a seamless operator on that
Right.
score. That's for sure.
Exactly.
It's interesting the platform 10 standpoint I was glad you mentioned mealybug, because the other things that really kind of rose to the top of the charts were botrytis, though that cuts across a lot of crops. But talk a little bit about the powdery mildew situation. That also seems to be a persistent challenge. That
Yeah.
whether it's loss of tools or just there's nothing that's consistently the works. What are
And
your thoughts there?
I think we've done a pretty good job on, there are fortunately, knock on wood, there are enough tools right now in our toolbox that we can keep the the powdery mildew down. One of the things that all the table grape breeding programs, they're all always kind of experimenting with disease resistance in the grapes. And one of them they always kind of talk about is powdery mildew. I have told them, I said, that would be great if we could come up with something because, we're in powdery mildew. You don't wait till you have powdery mildew. It's all about prevention. And so you're always on these table grapes and the mildew is always out there and we're preventing it from getting started. So what we're trying to do, we're applying something, typically some sort of fungicide. It might just be sulfur dust or or the fungicides. We're putting something on about every 6 or 7 days. Well, the problem in California is we have worker reentries, and after certain dates, I mean, it's a lot. Even just sulfur dust used to be no worker reentry. You could sulfur dust and put the crew, but now it's 3 days. Well, in table grapes, you're never out of the fields very long. You're always pulling leaves, tipping bunches, moving clones, some moving wires, things like that. So it's like now, and then you're having to sit there and try. Okay, I'm going to have to put a fungicide on. So I've got 3 days that I can't get in. Then I'm going to have to come back 3 or 4, 3 days after that. So then you got to really the logistics of like, when can I get in, put those people in, and get the jobs knocked out in time so I can come back with my next fungicide. But it's like, but powdery. But I do tell the guys in the breeding program, they said it'd be great if you come up with a resistant variety to powdery mildew, but it's not at the top of my list as variety, because some of the you looked at them going, the flavor's not very good on that, but they'll say, yeah, but it's resistant to powdery mildew. I go, the consumer doesn't care about
Right.
that. I said, I can't sit there and say this was resistant to powdery mildew,
Yeah,
so I didn't have
can't
to use
market that
much
one.
fungicide.
That's for sure. Peter, do you have anything?
Yeah, no, very much so. Very interesting, Kevin. I just want to go back to regulation. Interestingly, Dennis and myself were speaking to DPR yesterday in Sacramento about regulation and kind of some of the modeling around that. And I know there's been a lot of focus in California around the 2050 roadmap for pest management. Of course, we are also very conscious of what's going on in other parts of the world. If you look at Europe, 2030 rather than 2050 seems to be kind of a key date. And we're waiting to see what the Canadians might do, whether they may drift towards that kind of European mentality. So I'm just interested, when you talk about regulation, clearly you're directly impacted by what might be coming out of Sacramento. But in terms of that global set of requirements that regulators are putting in, how much knowledge is shared within the table grape community as to what's going on in other parts of the world in terms of actually looking and protecting those long-term export markets?
Peter, it's interesting. It's not that much shared. It's amazing how I think naive some of us are. We think that DPR and California has the toughest regulations, and we have all these hurdles that are good. And I tell people, I said, look, there are retailers in the UK that are way tougher than our retailers. So I said, don't be thinking that California comes up with the hardest regulations and stuff like that. So I think, those of us that are exporting, and Illume does export, we're about 40% of our product gets exported, mostly the Pacific Rim, but a little bit to the UK and Europe. That it's like, but you have to be aware of these things, because it's like you can't just sit there. And even, every country's got their different, what we give them pesticide residue levels and things like that. So you just can't sit there. You have to be cognizant of these things. I mean, I've had loads red tag that would have been fine in one market, but it got red tagged because it went over the threshold in another market. And it's just that those are the things that you constantly got to stay on top of these things. You can't just willy nilly. We'll spray that, because we're always talking between us. Okay, what can we do? Well, we can't apply this too close to harvest because we could have some residue issues in the UK, or we could have some residue issues in Korea. So it's those are all day long daily conversations.
Yeah, really interesting. If I can just pick up on that, the reference to retailers. I know you mentioned the UK. Supermarket chains like Tesco's have now got really quite strong kind of sustainability goals, and they're setting dates to support those goals. I heard also yesterday of a story that Walmart, I think, are now selling pesticide-free lettuce. Now, to me, that's a really interesting model from a kind of from a grower perspective, because at point of sale, it's almost like saying to consumers, do you want to choose between lettuce that's got pesticides on it or pesticides that don't? And I've always said that regulators growl, but retailers can bite. So I'm really interested in what you were saying. It kind of supports my own thinking that actually retailers are going to become much more important going forward in terms of this discussion than perhaps they have been in the past.
No doubt, Peter. I mean, it's just, you're right. I mean, like I said, they are the gatekeeper. I guess I would ask the consumer, do you want pesticide? Do you want the lettuce that had pesticide, or do you want no lettuce? I mean, that could be the more of the reality. I mean, it's just, so, we're not going to, I mean, I know the table grape industry right now with the tools we have. I mean, I think there are new biologicals coming down the path that we'll be able to do, but I mean, right now you couldn't grow a nice, pretty table grape that most people are ready to go buy it, because we know people in the produce section, they buy with their eyes. I mean, it has to look attractive for them to buy it. And it's just, I mean, if they're going to sit there and expect us to like go with no pesticides. And it's like, I also remember Walmart probably about a little over a decade ago, made this broad claim that they were going to go all organic. And we're all like going, oh, wow, what do we, we all had a little or some organic program. We're all like going, we're all going, if Walmart's doing it, is everybody going to follow suit? Well, that big headline made us all pretty nervous, but it's amazing how that just kind of went away, and they didn't go all organic, and it just so I don't know. I mean, you're right. I mean, we've got to work with these retailers. They're the key, and even these breeding companies now, the great breeding companies. Uh, we don't like it as growers. What these breeding companies are doing now is they go around us. Usually they come to us. We're their sounding board. They run, hey, what do you guys think of this variety? Now they're taking varieties that they like. They're taking them to the major retailers and saying, here's a variety you should have. And then the retailers are coming to us saying, why haven't you planted this variety? We're like, wow. It's like, are you willing to give me a contract on that variety? And that's like, so that, of course, that doesn't happen. But we used to be like the main sounding board. Now we're a little concerned that we're like they're doing a bit of an end run on us.
Yep.
What part of the Platform 10 program is this Global Grower Trial Network, which you're going to be participating in. So your organization, when you encounter a product, and we're in the process of developing, with feedback, field trial designs, because we think they're going to differ somewhat, or depending upon the product, not dramatic probably overstates it than synthetics. When you look at new products, do you like that? How does your organization have the ability to do that? Just like there's seed crops, can there be the idea of essentially a research crop, and how long does it take you to get comfortable with something?
Oh, we're dead. I always tell people, I said, our doors are open. We're trialing things every year. And one of the things we've talked about here is I almost need to hire somebody that's their job, is because we set up many, many trials every year. And I mean, it's like, and then too many times we're like, uh-oh, we forgot those 2 rows and we put that trial on. It's like, did we get more yield out of those or something like that? So, but I tell guys, we have to keep looking at new things coming down the pike. And I mean, I think the biopesticides and stuff like that, I mean, that's the future. I just think that, I think the regulators are going to tell us that, the retailers are going to tell us that, the consumers are going to tell us that's what they want. So, I mean, we have to be open to that. And we are always testing things, but it's like, I mean, of course, the salespeople will always come up to you that they're pushing their product, and it's like, it's going to do everything. It'll even grow hair on your head, Kevin. But it's like, so, but it's, I think we put them in, and I'll tell them, okay, here's a trial. We used 4 different products. You tell me, you look at the grapes and you tell me, you rank them, which 2 rows are the best. And we've had these guys, and they'll come out and they say, okay, this is number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll show them, okay, your product you chose it, and it's number 4. So it's like, and I won't base it on 1 year. I mean, typically we're doing multiple tests in multiple years. But that's also another reason why I think it's important that, and I like the Southern Hemisphere angle that I have, because I remember going back. One of my mentors 40 years ago told me, he goes, to be a really good table grape grower, you need about 40 to 45 seasons. He goes, the only problem is you get 1 a year. So he goes, it's not like vegetables where you can get it 2 or 3 times, you get
Right.
2 or 3 shots at it. But it's, so now, a lot of what I'm doing up here, and though it's different down there, I mean, I'll have the guys in Peru do some of the same trials we're doing here with the same chemicals. We'll try things, saying varietal stuff, the different fertilizers and things like that. So at least, even though you have to take some differences into account, at least I'm getting to look at it multiple times a year instead of 1 shot at it. So that helps me a lot.
Good. Peter, do you have anything else? I don't know about you, but I think we'll be pretty darn proud to introduce Kevin as part of the global cast of growers we're getting ready to work with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a fascinating conversation, Kevin. I'm just thinking, Dennis, that in 2 or 3 weeks' time, of course, we're going to be over in Perth, as you said, in Australia. Here in New Zealand, most of our grapes are for wine. We don't really have a very large table grape industry, but that's not the case in Australia. They, I think, generate about $1 billion a year worth of table grapes. I think there are about 25,000 acres in terms of land, which is currently used for table grapes. So we will meet some locals, I guess, in Perth.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to share their story in terms of the lessons that, or the challenges and lessons that they're currently facing in Australia compared to some of the comments that Kevin's made, both about California and also Peru.
Well,
Yeah, no, and Peter, I made numerous trips to Australia. I mean, so I have very good friends there, but they have, I mean, if anything, we always kind of think our labor situation is the worst. I always remind people, you think ours is bad? Go to Australia. I said, they have a tougher labor situation. I mean, they have to bring in people from other countries. I said, and these guys in Australia used to tell me, God, we wish we had a Mexico at our southern border. And it's like, it's the challenges. We none of us escaped any of these challenges. You may not have one, but you got one that somebody else doesn't have. They're worldwide.
well,
Indeed.
we appreciate your time. I know you've got I'm going to guess, and given your family's background, you're a farmer at heart. But you mentioned the word challenges. You probably spend more of your time going to meetings like you're getting ready to go to deal with challenges than farming. So
It seems like that for sure. I mean, it's like I remember the days when I used to just farm. Now it's just, now it's water meetings, this meeting, that meeting, this board meeting. So, but it's hey, you stay involved. That's what you got to do.
there you go. Well, we're glad your organization is open to innovation and trialing, and we're not going to tell you to hire that full time person, but we are going to look forward to working with you on some trials here in the coming months and years. So, Kevin, appreciate your time and terrific to see you, and thanks for joining us.
All right, thank you guys.
You
Have a great
bet.
day.
Okay, terrific.
And
Peter,
thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
That's great. That's another great episode. Really enjoyed the comments that Kevin made. I look forward to promoting that podcast so that those comments are shared with our much bigger audience.
that's right. I'll look forward to that. And Kevin was good enough that I think we can count on folks will keep coming back to see who we got next. So, Kevin, thanks for helping raise the bar a bit.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
All
Thanks
right.
very much.
Good luck. All right,
Thanks,
take
Kevin.
care, guys.
Okay,
See ya.
Peter, we'll see you
Cheers.
on the next episode of Grower Talks.
Perfect.